Oh, hey. Hi, everybody. It's Carolyn Marie with HealingNRG. I wasn't sure we were rolling. Listen, I wanted to talk to you about subtle sabotagers. And, I specialize in emotional wellness. The idea is that we can be sound emotionally and that we can invite pleasant emotions in our life, into our life. But in order to live in that space more regularly, we have to be willing to recognize what we are doing that actually sabotages that. And the reason why it's so important is because most of society is living in the unawareness state. So, most people believe that addictions are physical. They look at alcohol, drugs, having lots of sex with lots of different partners, being really promiscuous, and those things as physical addictions, that which they are. They are physical addictions. The reality is that emotional addictions are actually more harmful, and they're more subtle, and they're more likely not to be recognized, and they're more pervasive at blocking our happiness and our fulfillment, and ultimately living a healthy life. So physical addictions, we can see, right? We can see when we are overeating, or we can see when we are, working too much to avoid interpersonal relationships. And if we can't see it, others certainly can, or we can see it in others because they're physical. Whereas emotional addictions are much more difficult to recognize. So what do I mean by an emotional addiction? Well, emotional addiction is me wanting a feeling from you to cover over a feeling of fear that I have inside of me that I'm unwilling to. Basically, anytime we have an addiction, it is to avoid an emotion or a feeling that we find uncomfortable. So, for example, if I desire feelings from you and then I didn't get them, I'd either feel angry or disappointed that you didn't give them to me, or I'd just go get them from someone else to show you. That is a real telltale sign that you're in an addictive relationship. And you're out. You didn't meet my expectations or my addictions. That is not love. That is, you'll scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. And as soon as one person does not do what the other person wants, we're no longer lovers. We're no longer friends. We're no longer acquaintances. And we're no longer giving each other gifts. The truth is that a real gift is something that you don't expect anything back from. And that's an indication that you're actually being loving. The other is an unloving act to yourself and to others. So while we see mostly a strong desire from people to do something for someone while others do something for them, it's important to recognize that this is an expectation, and it's like a bartering system. It's not love. It's certainly not unconditional. It's very conditional, that someone is expecting, even if it's a gift, that they give you something and they expect something in return. So really recognizing that this is happening in our lives allows us to not get sucker punched when the expectation from someone else we're not meeting. But the truth is, we have to first become aware of what it is within us that we're unwilling to fear, what that terror is within us. So, for example, say that I'm a woman and that my father was not very active in my early upbringing, and so I did not feel that love from a male. I then may try to, when I grow up, overly control men to get the attention that I never got as an adult, rather than to sit in the emotion from the past that hurts my heart and let myself grieve the truth of that unloving reality and not pretend that it's anything different than what it is. It's unloving. Because when I grieve it, then I'll no longer try to enter into addictive relationships or control men. Do you understand where I'm going there? So it's all about dealing with the feelings of the pain. We do have the ability to be whole and sound emotionally, but only if we're willing to do the work. So when we have any sort of a substance or an emotion that we're using to avoid any sort of pain inside of us, that is what I'm referring to as an addiction. So a lot of people, maybe even yourself, have an addiction to getting attention, which really is helping to cover over a feeling of loneliness that they haven't let go from childhood or earlier in their upbringing. So anytime we're interacting with another to receive a pleasant emotion that's not already existing in us, that's an indicator of the subtle sabotagers that I'm referring to. And yes, as I was saying, it is possible to have these pleasant emotions existing in us, but only if we're willing to take responsibility for what we're doing to avoid the unpleasant emotions and step back from these addictive behaviors, whether they're physical or the more subtle ones, which are emotional. So the other reason why it is so difficult to identify these is because society accepts emotional addictions as normal. Of course, if we look around society, we can clearly see that society is not healthy, society is not happy, society is not loving, and all of the things that we really desire in our heart, we're not going to get as long as we are in these addictions. And as I say, the emotional addictions are much more of a sabotager than the physical addictions. So the emotional addictions, often we learn early in childhood to create, to use, and they create a facade. Our families are the biggest teachers of how to wear the mask and put on a facade. And then we have this mask that we go out into the world wearing, and we don't even know who we truly are. And it's only by identifying these emotional addictions that we begin to uncover and drop the mask, and then we feel, oh no, that happened to us. And we must be willing to allow ourselves to feel that if we want to discover who we truly are, because these masks block our connection to our true self, to our soul. They block our relationship with God. They block our relationship to our soulmate. They block our ability to be able to feel the discordant emotions that are running us away from our happiness and our truth. So I'd really love to hear from you after this video what it is that you recognize as especially an emotional indicator that you might be using to avoid some of your fear or your terror or your unworthiness. Something that is definitely causing you to enter into relationships of barter. Romantic, but sometimes they're even sibling relationships, because siblings tend to be raised wearing the same masks. So it is comfortable to be in a sibling relationship that makes you feel like you're not wearing a mask. And that's part of the ability to be able to step back from these emotional addictions so that you can actually see the truth of what's going on, take responsibility for your emotions, learn how to drop down and feel through them so they may be released. Because once they're released, then the pleasant emotions can return, because that's the state that we were created in. And in order to get there, we got to step back from these addictions. And in order to step back from them, we have to first be aware that they're happening. So I'm sending you lots of love. And until next time, this is Carolyn Marie with HealingNRG.